2.5 months ago, Senator Pat Leahy appeared on this show to tout his proposal for a truth commission on torture. And then the idea sort of petered out. Washington just didn't seem to have the stomach for a big investigation. Now the Truth Commission idea is back, thanks to the Republicans. When the Obama administration decided to declassify Bush-era documents about torture, that got Bush administration officials on the defensive, and Republicans decided to change their strategy. They abandoned their previous defense on the torture issue, which was, we never tortured no one, never happened. Their new tack is that there was torture, and it was a crime, but Nancy Pelosi was an accomplice to that crime. If this were a Bugs Bunny cartoon, this would be the point when the coyote had sprinted off the end of the cliff and was hanging there for a second in midair before, pew. I asked Nancy Pelosi back in February whether or not she was told in 2002 that techniques like waterboarding were being used on prisoners. She told me then, and she maintains now, that she was never told waterboarding had already been used dozens of times on a prisoner named Abu Zubaydah. The CIA's records say that she was told that waterboarding had been used. Pelosi says those records are not accurate. And the Republicans see a disagreement like that the same way that a bass sees a shiny, glinting piece of metal spinning through the lake. Never mind the big hook.
She made some outrageous accusations last week where she said that the CIA lied to her.
Nancy Pelosi has stepped in it big time. You have the Speaker of the House who said that she wasn't told, she didn't have a clue, and in fact, the evidence contradicts that.
I think she ought to apologize to our intelligence professionals around the world.
I think this is the most despicable, dishonest, and vicious political effort I've seen in my lifetime. I think she has lied to the House, and I think that the House has an absolute obligation to open an inquiry, and I hope there will be a resolution to investigate her, and I think this is a big deal. I don't think the Speaker of the House can lie to the country on national security matters.
If that's not over the top enough for you, Mike Huckabee went so far as to compose a 7-stanza poem, a rhyming poem about how excited he is by this Nancy Pelosi torture angle. I am not kidding. 7 stanzas. Republicans love this bait. Here's the hook, and it is barbed. CIA Director Leon Panetta attached a cover sheet to the initial documents that got the Republicans so excited. A cover sheet that told the House Intelligence Committee that although the documents represented the CIA's best recollections of what happened in those briefings, quote, in the end, the House Intelligence Committee will have to determine whether this information is an accurate summary of what actually happened. Panetta then sent a follow-up letter to CIA employees saying that while the CIA thinks the records are accurate, quote, ultimately it is up to Congress to evaluate all the evidence and reach its own conclusions about what happened. In other words, the CIA says it can't really vouch for the accuracy of its records. And if Congress thinks something else happened at those briefings, maybe it did. Maybe Nancy Pelosi is right. And then there's Florida Senator Bob Graham, who was in on many of the same types of briefings that Pelosi was. The CIA's records show 4 occasions on which they say they briefed Mr. Graham on detainee issues. But Senator Graham's own meticulous notes show that on 3 of those 4 days, those briefings didn't happen. So the CIA's records maybe aren't so accurate. Ultimately, the Republicans attacking Nancy Pelosi as an accomplice to torture concedes that torture took place. And by attacking her recollection of the details of what happened back in 2002, details she feels pretty sure about, they have added their own voices and hers to the now swelling chorus calling for a full, complete, unedited disclosure on torture. When, where, and how it was done, who authorized it, who knew about it, and who carried it out. Paging Senator Leahy. Your idea is back in fashion, thanks to the Republican Party. Joining us now is Greg Sargent, who reports and writes the Plumline blog at whorunsgov.com. Greg, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Rachel.
We are seeing real unity from Republicans on the Pelosi issue. They seem to see attacking her on the torture issue as a political winner. Is that your assessment?
Well, I mean, I guess we have to keep in mind that any kind of Republican unity is a victory, given what we've seen in the past few weeks from the leadership of the party. I mean, it does take the spotlight off the squabbling among Republican leaders about the direction of the party, and it focuses on a lightning rod for the right. So in that sense, it probably rallies the demoralized base in a way that few other things could.
Greg, in terms of the facts here and the allegations on both sides, when Michael Steele goes on the Sunday shows and says that the evidence contradicts what Pelosi has said about how she was briefed, is that actually true?
Well, I guess we should consider the fact that 3 Democrats, senior Democrats, are all on record saying, contesting the CIA's version of what they told these Democrats. Bob Graham, Jay Rockefeller, and of course Pelosi. The CIA itself, as you pointed out, has said very clearly numerous times that they are not willing to vouch for to take overall responsibility for the accuracy of their depiction of what happened. And by the way, there's been a development that hasn't really been focused on, but it's very important. On Fox over the weekend, Pete Hoekstra, who's been pursuing the notes and memos that supposedly will prove that Pelosi was briefed on torture, he said clearly on Fox that he had looked at those and that they wouldn't provide a clear picture of what actually happened, and said that there are still other CIA documents out there that have to be obtained in order to establish this. So, it's Steele reading from this several lines from the chart that the CIA drew up versus 3 Democrats, the CIA's own concession that the material might not be accurate, and Hoekstra's claim that even the notes and memos don't prove what supposedly they're supposed to prove. So, not looking good.
That means that as they continue to press this allegation against Nancy Pelosi, because I think you're right that they do see some short-term political gain in hitting her. They see her as a very soft target. As they continue to pressure her on this, it makes it more likely that there will be more disclosures, and those disclosures, it seems, are likely to help her. I mean, she certainly seems very confident that when those documents come out, they will help her side of the story, doesn't she?
Well, I mean, one of the facts that just seems to have disappeared from this debate is that Pelosi has said over and over that she wants the documents released. Now, so she supports the release of documents that will prove that she was complicit in torture? Not clear.
How does Bob Graham factor into this in a continuing way, Greg? In a continuing way, I know that you did the first interview with him, sort of trying to corroborate the briefing story.
I mean, one interesting thing about the Graham stuff is that, keep in mind the timeline of this. The terror suspect had been waterboarded supposedly more than 83 times in August of 2002. In September of 2002, Pelosi early in the month, then Graham later in the month, was briefed about this. Now, imagine if Graham had been told, given a clear sense of the extent of the torture that had happened. Imagine if he had been told something roughly to the effect that the suspect had been waterboarded, 4 times or, multiple times. Seems like something he'd remember. Obviously none of us were in the room. No one really knows what was said, but these seem like facts that belong in the debate to me.
Greg Sargent, writer of the Plumline blog at whorunsgov.com. Thanks for your time tonight, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel.